Can everyone hear me all right? Excellent. I don't know what Django selectors are. I'll be talking about descriptors and why Django needs them. And this is not to mock you, it's because I'll give you this disclaimer right away. I'm not an experienced Django user, so if you hope this is a hardcore Django talk, you can leave now and I will not be offended, alright? So, what are descriptors and why does Django need them? And my name is Rodrigo, you can call me Rodrigo. I say Rodrigo in my native language, but it's, as long as you're not purposefully offending me, like calling me out, calling me names, you can call me whatever you want, Rodrigo is fine. I do some Python teaching and training at that website, and I also write a lot about Python on Twitter, because who wouldn't want to write about Python, right? And with this out of the way, let's get started. So what are descriptors and why does Django need them? And like I said, this isn't really a Django talk, okay? This is actually more of a Python talk that's in disguise for the web day. Because descriptors, they're a Python feature and we will see what it really is. And it's just a very powerful feature that lets frameworks like Django and others hide lots of very interesting functionality behind what looks like very simple code. So if you've used Django, you've used descriptors, even if you don't know it. Actually, have you ever used Python? You've used descriptors. You don't know it, maybe, but you have used descriptors. Right, so if I'm telling you that Django uses descriptors, and if I want to show you why Django needs them and how they actually work, maybe I should start by showing you that Django does use descriptors, right? I studied mathematics, so if I make a claim, I need to prove it. So here's proof. I was worried for a second because in my view the slide looks funky, but it's looking correct here. Does this look like decent Django code? It's an honest question. Like I said, I don't have a lot of experience, so I'm just double checking. It's mostly taken from the docs, so it should be kind of fine, but you never know. So this is Django code, so nice. Now let's see, does it use descriptors? If so, where are they? Because it doesn't, I don't see the word descriptor anywhere, right? But yeah, descriptors are over there. Fields use descriptors. And there's actually a couple of hidden things that are not clear or obvious if you're not an experienced Django user, but there's a couple of hidden things that also use descriptors and that power lots of very interesting functionality. And the point of this short slide and this short snippet is that these fields, and in particular the foreign key they're establishing a relationship between cities and persons, right? A person can be in a city. For example, right now I'm in Vilnius. But how many people are in Vilnius right now? Like, wild guess. More than 10, right? Probably. And it's probably a fairly decent number. And if my person model was a more complicated model with things other than just my name or that person's name, it could be a pretty heavy, in terms of memory, it could be a pretty heavy model, right? So whenever I talk about the city of Vilnius, if I want to work with it, maybe I don't want to load all of the persons associated with a city immediately, right? Maybe I just want to check the name of the city. And if to check the name of the city, I need to get the thousands and thousands of people that are associated with that city, that's going to be an expensive operation. But if you're working with Django, that's not going to be an issue, right? You will be able to access the name of the city without having to load every single person. Right? This is not a blunder, right? I said something that sounds reasonable. Okay? So then, descriptors are at the very core of this functionality. Right? So then, again, why does Django need descriptors? Django needs descriptors because there must be something that's between saying that the attribute exists and actually letting you work with it. There's going to be a layer, because if the attribute is just there, if it's a plain attribute in the Python sense, if it's a plain attribute, as soon as you load the city, you're going to be loading, say, a list with the thousands and thousands of people. And you don't want that. You want to say that there's a way of connecting the city with the persons and the persons with their cities without having to load them or use them in the Python sense immediately. There must be something in the way. There must be a layer that allows you to do this magic. Who cares to guess what this layer is? At the very core. And I'll give you a hint, it's the topic of my talk. Descriptors, exactly. So the descriptors are the layer that are in the middle and that let you do this magic. So let's go back to the snippet of code that we have. And now let's part a little bit away from Django, because I wanted to use Django as the motivating example, or as one motivating example, but like I said, descriptors are a Python feature. It's a core Python thing. It's a synthetic feature of the language, not of Django, right? And so let's part a little bit from this example and focus a little bit on the Python side of things. So what I'll do is, let's say that this person also has a name field, because it's going to be easier to work with, just a plain string. And now let's actually simplify this, because even before thinking about cities, I can just think of a person. Right? This is sensible, I think. I hope you all agree with me. If you disagree, you can raise your hands. I don't have time to change the slides now, but you're free to disagree. And now, let's get rid of Django altogether. And this is where you might start to get sad if you're a Django lover. But at this point, what we just have a class person, and we have this first name, and I changed the char field to something with a different name, just so you don't get fixed on the Django char field. So let's create an intermediate layer, this char attr, so this character attribute, that lets you define string attributes, and that lets you in some way have the attributes without having to work with it immediately, or without having to carry it around every single time you talk about a person. I see some people with confused looks. Is it because it's early, or is it because of what I'm saying? Does this make some sense? Like the thing we want to build? Let's build this char attr, whatever it might be. We will see it uses descriptors, and the point will be it's going to create a layer that lets you, for example, create a person without having to load its name into memory immediately. So let's pretend the person was stored in a database or over an API, and you can retrieve the person without having to retrieve its first name immediately. That's going to be the idea of what we're doing. Exactly, that's what I said. Sorry, again, the presenter view here is looking funky, so while I should be seeing here what I'm seeing there, I'm not, so it's doubly confusing for me, but I think we can handle it. So now let's write some code. Let's write a little bit of code. Are you up for it? Excellent. So now let's see, can I move this? No, this is going to be terrible. I actually need to mirror my screen. Let me think for a second, because I'm not good enough to be writing code there without actually seeing it. It would have been disastrous. So let's see, let's change my display settings, and let's mirror. Perfect, this should work. Yes, okay, we're good to go. Sorry for that. So let's write some code. I want to create some class person. Is this big enough for people in the back? Excellent. And I want to create this first name thingy. Now, if I only wanted to create a class person and have a layer that lets me work with persons without having to load their first names, a reasonable thing to do would be to actually use a property to define my first name. I'm not sure if you thought about it, but I could do this. Load first name from database. I could do this. Right? This would be a reasonable thing to do, because I can see from the code that there is a first name, but I will not be loading this name from the database until I actually use the first name. Is this familiar to everyone, the property decorator? Excellent. So that's more or less the idea of what we want to do here. Except the issue is, if I do a property for every single attribute that I want to define, I will have to create this getter method, right? And so this char attr thingy from the slide, this, you can think of it kind of like a property factory. So we're going to take this logic of creating a method that's going to act as a getter for something, and we will encapsulate it in this thing, in this char attr. And this will use the descriptors. so that we could have a first name and then a last name and then the name of the country and the name of the city and whatever. Alright, that's the point or the objective of what we will be doing. So, what is this char header? I've said it a bunch of times. We know it's going to be a descriptor, we just need to finally see what a descriptor is, right? So, what do we call this method? I've called it a getter method, right? Does this sound familiar? It's a getter method because it's the method, and actually, it's very important. So let me do the following. I have a production ready database right here. This is my production ready database. And I'm loading my name from the database. Let's actually see the code running, right? So if I create a Rodrigo person, this is not going to run because it's not defined. And I can do a Rodrigo.firstName. And this is a very important point because although this is defined as a method here, it's used as an attribute, right? So the property does create that layer, and it's the fact that I'm hiding the property behind the method that lets you create this intermediate state where I know the first name can be used, but I haven't used it yet. So if I run the code, hopefully it prints my name, right? No one is surprised that the name was printed. And if I put I don't know if you use advanced debugging tools, I do. This only gets printed after my after, right? So if I create the person, I don't see the debug because I haven't used the first name yet, then I'm going to print the after, then the debug, and then the name. Right? Does everyone agree with the order of the printed things? Okay, so then if we agree on this, we can go straight to descriptors, because this is the stepping stone for understanding descriptors. So let's get rid of this first name thingy, let's uncomment this, and let's write some code that makes this work. So what I'll do is I will create a class, and a descriptor, what's a descriptor? It's just an object with a _get method. So these dunder methods, we already know that they're methods with a specific name that let you interact with the Python syntax, and in particular this __get__, it lets you customize the way attributes are accessed. And again, we are hiding attribute access behind the method, so we can create this intermediate layer where we know the thing exists, we haven't loaded it yet. So what does this get accept? It's a terrible time to blank. It accepts an instance, or let's write it the way I usually do to prevent further blanks, and an object type. So this method get, this will be called whenever I try to access my attribute. What's going to get passed to this method is going to be the object whose attribute I'm trying to access. So when I do this print.Rodrigo first name, print Rodrigo.firstName, the object is going to be Rodrigo, and the object type is going to be person, because Rodrigo is an object of the type person. So let's add, again, very advanced debugging tools. Let's print the object and the object type to make sure I didn't say something that's wrong. And in here, we're going to access our production ready database, and we're going to fetch the first name of this person. So now, if I haven't messed anything up, what's going to happen? I'm going to instantiate a person, then I'm going to print after, which is a terrible thing to print here, let's say start, whatever, and then I'm going to access Rodrigo.firstName. When I access Rodrigo.firstName, I'm going to access this char attribute, and then Python will see, wait, hold on, char attribute actually has a dunder get, so it will run this dunder get to fetch the value of the first name. It will pass the Rodrigo instance here, it will pass the class person, oops, I didn't know that was a shortcut. It will pass the person class here, and then it will return the first name, and finally I print the first name. So if I run this, this is what I get. Notice that I get the start, I get the object, which is a person object, I get the object type, which is a class person, and I finally get my name. Was everyone able to follow, roughly, more or less, kind of? If you're kind of confused, it's fine, because one, I'm showing it to you maybe for the first time, and second, this takes a bit of time to go through. But this is the main idea, and this is again similar to the property getter. Right? And this method is enough to make char attribute a descriptor. Now, things can get very interesting really fast, because right now my production ready database assumes that for some reason I only have one person, right? So I might want to disambiguate between different persons, or I might have also a last name that's a char attribute, right? I might have another one, so if these are exactly the same, how can I tell them apart from within get? Do we understand the problem now? If I have exactly the same object here, how can my underscore get behave differently to retrieve either the first name or the last name? Okay, so then a second under method comes in very helpful, and it's the def, so underscore set name. And this set named under method is going to get called by Python when I do this attribution, and it will, in a way, it will notify this instance of the name of the thing that I'm assigning it to. So char attribute will be notified that it's being assigned to a thing called last name. And this one right here will be notified that it's being assigned to something called first name. And so this notification happens here. And again, did I really blank out again? Well, we definitely need the name of the thing we're being assigned to. There's someone in the audience that nods along as if I get it right, they're nodding, so it's good. Okay, so I might need a third thing here, I don't remember, so we'll see what happens. And typically what you do is, inside this char attribute, you save the name of the thing, right? So that later on you can retrieve it. So we'll save the attribute name, and we'll, it's already complaining, so I'm already, excellent. No, wait, a special method set and expects two parameters, one was given. Right, so it's probably, I'm probably missing the object, something like that. Let's see if it works, that's because I got it right. If it doesn't work, give me a second, it's the issue with live coding, but for some reason I thought, let's do it either way. So my last name is this thing, let's not try to pronounce it. And in here, when I'm getting something, instead of fetching the first name, I'll fetch the attribute name, right? And now it's just a matter of printing both and seeing if I get the key error or if I get the correct names. Excellent. Okay. So set name is being notified of the name of the attribute it's being associated with, and that's how we can disambiguate the two. Alright, and this is a very helpful tool when you're working with descriptors, but this method does not make a descriptor. Okay, it's just a helpful tool. And finally, to conclude, we had something like a max length equals 100. So now let's add something to this descriptor that lets me customize how attributes are set. So I've customized getting the attribute, now I'll customize setting the attribute. And for this, Python will give me the instance and the value I'm trying to assign to this attribute. And now, what I want to do is I want to, truncate the value to make sure that it satisfies this max length, right? So in order to do this, what I need to do is I need to save the max length when I'm initializing my char attribute. I need to save it for later. Let's say that it has a default value of a bajillion characters. I'm not sure if that's a number, bajillion. That's not a bajillion, by the way, but it's close. And then what we'll do is we'll go to our production-ready database. It's good to see that my terrible sense of humor also works in Lithuania. And what we'll do is we'll access our production-ready database and save the value with the correct size. So I'll slice it. And then, just to make sure it works, what I'll do here is Rodrigo.firstname, I'll make it very big, times a bajillion, and then when I print it again it should only have 100 characters. Now, will it work? Who thinks it will work? Okay, some people have faith in me. Who thinks it will explode? Let's see what happens. Okay, this is not a bajillion R's. Right? So, the quick summary of this rundown over the basics of descriptors. Now, how am I going to do this? Let's stop the presentation and let's start it again. Can I do this? Yes, I can. So the quick summary of what we've seen, briefly, was that the attribute get is the method that runs when you access an attribute. So it looks like you're accessing attributes, but you're actually able to run arbitrary code, which could be loading something from a database or doing even more fancy things. You have the dunder set, which lets you customize setting the attribute, for example, for validation or for other purposes. And there was this very helpful tool that lets you notify descriptors of the name they actually have as an attribute. So it helps you disambiguate between different attributes, and it's what lets you create one descriptor that can be used multiple times. So people tend to use to ask what I use for the slides because of the coding animations. I did live coding, so you didn't get much of that, but this is the tool I used. And if you're willing to give me some feedback, either good or bad, feel free to scan this QR code, and I'll also link to an article where we go into depth on descriptors. And in the article, I can assure you I did not mix up the names of the arguments or the order. So that's going to give you some more confidence if you're interested in learning more about descriptors. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll see you around.